Um, 8 days ago, I got to perform a wedding for my young friends at Momentum, Christian and Ava. They are now Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez. All right, this is Christian. This is Ava. This is another one of our friends, JM. This is just the only picture I could find of them that I had on my phone. So throwing a little JM, shout out to JM. And that's your boy right there. That's your boy. Okay. So they got married 8 days ago. I got to perform the ceremony. It was really, really cool. My daughter, Aslan, was a bridesmaid. My son, Zion, was the best man. And it was just great. But we've known them for several years. They've dated for a while through high school, and my kids have known them from middle school. During Christmas break 2022, back when they were dating, Christian decided to go to Mexico with his parents over the holiday season. Now, most of Christian's dad's side of the family, they live in Mexico, and his parents have been going to Mexico every winter as long as he can remember. But Christian, for a couple years during his junior and senior year of high school, kind of sat out the holiday trip to Mexico because he was dating Ava, and he wanted to see Ava over the holidays, and he stayed home, sat it out. But before they entered into college at the University of Akron, Christian and Ava, they decided to go on the family trip during the holidays to Mexico. And they thought they would go. But, you know, everybody was kind of going from his extended family at different times. Some were flying, some were leaving at a different time. Usually they all caravan together from Northeast Ohio to Central Mexico in vehicles. It is, I'm telling you, people, you hear me? It's a 40-hour drive. So shut up with your complaining about how far Amish country is, okay? I mean, it is a 40-hour, so they drive, they caravan, and it's kind of to stay together, and there's strength in numbers, you know, have each other's backs as they make this long, long trip in several vehicles. So this particular year, there's only one vehicle. It's Christian's dad's truck. They're going together, and there's 5 of them. It was Ava and Christian and his parents and his sister. So 5 of them in one truck. So they're headed down there. They cross the border. They get down deep into Mexico. They're just a few hours away from Christian's grandpa's house, and they're moving along deep into Mexico when all of a sudden, before they get to their destination, a truck pulls out and cuts them off and stops them, forces them to stop. 2 men hop out of the truck with what appeared to be AK-47s. And ordered all 5 of them out and to cram into the back seat of Christian's dad's vehicle. So they're all back there crammed in, and the 2 guys with the guns get in the front seat, and they tell them, give them all their possessions, cell phones, headphones, wallets, whatever they have, everything basically but their clothes. And they're all crammed in the back seat, and at gunpoint, they're told to keep their heads down as they're driven to an undisclosed location. Once they were taken to that location, they were ordered into a different truck where they were held for a few hours. And it was hot, and they were without water, so they started cramping. And the slightest movement led to threats from the criminals, which almost led to Christian's dad being taken out of the vehicle and beaten just because they're trying to situate around and not cramp. Well, after a few hours of that, they were again taken to a different truck that was packed with other people who were also being robbed and kidnapped. And they were driven to a ranch in the middle of nowhere. Then they were forced to get out, and they were abandoned by the criminals. So at that point, there's around 20 to 30 people in this random spot out in the middle of nowhere with no possessions. And fortunately, a person on the ranch spotted them, recognized what was happening. Wasn't the first time they had seen this, so they deduced what was going on, and that person offered to drive them in the bed of his truck to a small city nearby, where they could then find some help. So while they were being held, the kidnappers at the time when they were stuck in one of those trucks, and when they had confiscated everything, they did give them back their passports and their IDs, and apparently, accidentally, they gave Christian back his debit card. So when they got to this little city, he was able to buy a phone and a bus ticket that would get them closer to his grandparents' house. And eventually, through a series of phone calls, bus rides, and rides from nearby family members, they made it to their home in Mexico. But that was Ava's first time ever going to Mexico, this horrible, horrible, traumatic experience. So Christian and Ava, other families stayed, but they bought a plane ticket back to the U.S. ASAP and basically only spent 1 day at the ranch and were just excited to get home and put that behind them. So that was really difficult. I mean, a super traumatic event. And Christian, I remember him telling me, I remember when it happened and afterward, just seeing their faces for months after that. They weren't the same. Christian talking about how we got to University of Akron for our first semester, and it was, again, a new place, a new situation. It felt unfamiliar, which kind of triggered the feelings of being in that situation, unfamiliar, scared. And he said, and me and Ava just kind of clung to one another. This trauma response was for us to we didn't want to be separated from one another. We were just always together. Now, as awful as that story is, for church people, if you've been a part of church for any amount of time, it's almost like you need a story like that to trigger in your brain what we're talking about today spiritually. Because it's something you hear so much over and over, usually in common language, you're like, yeah, I got that. And it's this kind of language that Jesus uses to explain to us the situation for mankind, spiritually speaking. What Jesus says is that we have been taken captive. Like we have been taken captive. It has all the anxiety of like a gunpoint situation where we are taken captive. You know, we've even worse, been defeated and turned into slaves. And Jesus, it's awful metaphor, but that's what we keep seeing is Jesus isn't exactly who we want him to be. He doesn't always just use soft and fluffy language. He uses very stark language that the people that were in his audience then would have been like, wow, like that's dramatic, you know? And so Jesus, if he didn't create the imagery, then he certainly perpetuated it, that we are captive, we're in trouble, we're defeated, and we have been turned into slaves. And that's the imagery for today. So turn to Mark chapter 10. This is the crux, really, of the entire Gospel of Mark. This is the key verse we're going to get to in the entire Gospel of Mark, which we've been working our way through on and off for the last couple of years. So in Christianity, there's this juxtaposition of the image of the lion and the lamb, which both represent Jesus. Now, last week we had a painter, Ali Alaya, who was here live painting, and so I want to show you this painting that we have. This is incredible. You're going to love it, and it might not be. If you were here last week, you saw it, and it's beautiful, but if you were here also, you might not expect this. Oh, that's not the right painting. Okay. So some of you have seen this, and I'll explain. That is the likeness of Momentum's very own Josh Kaiser as Napoleon Bonaparte. And I went into my office, 3 weeks ago, before the 8 a.m. service where he was playing bass guitar. I walked into my office, and this was on an easel sitting next to my desk. I don't usually laugh hard by myself. You know, when there's nobody in there to enjoy the humor. I was in there rolling, laughing. I was like, is that Josh Kaiser? It's like, what in the actual crap is going on here? It's like, who made this? It turned out him and my son Zion collaborated on this creation, and they framed it, bada boom, bada bing. It's in my office, and it will never go anywhere else. This will be beautiful. Chef's kiss to you guys. That was amazing. Only thing it could have been better is if you would have been shirtless like the Old Spice guy on the horse, you know. That's just incredible. And so, thanks, Josh. This, if you're newish, run for your life. You know, there are so many weirdos at this church. You do not want to get caught up with the likes of a Josh Kaiser or any of these other freaks we got around here. So this is the painting we're trying to get to. Like, that was blocking the lion and the lamb. 11% are leaving the church just based on this right now. So this is the imagery. It's meant to kind of describe the dual nature of Jesus. He is lion. As we sang in that song, he's the Lion of Judah. And that just means this conveys that he is powerful. He is a king. He's sovereign. All these things that a king is, and so the image of a lion well represents Jesus, but he is also, and this is what's unusual, a lamb. He's the lamb that was slain. What does that mean? It's the servant nature of God that we didn't expect. God, the character of God, he's a servant. He's the lamb that was slain. What does that mean? He willingly laid down his life for mankind to pay for our sins against him. And so the servanthood, it's just this crazy combination that represents the dual nature of Christ. And so this sacrificial servanthood, this sacrificial love is really the hallmark of what we've been talking about, the upside-down kingdom. It's values that don't make sense to the world. That doesn't make sense. Like the greatest is a servant. The greatest became a servant. And so that's what we've been getting our minds around for the last few weeks in Mark 9 and 10. And so in Mark 10, Jesus predicts his death for the third and final time in this gospel account. It says in verse 32, they, Jesus and his disciples, were on their way to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again, he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. So this is the first time that we've seen in the Gospel of Mark that the destination, what they're headed toward, is specifically Jerusalem. That's where the crucifixion happens. And so notice the determination. Jesus is leading the way. He's resolutely pressing toward his goal. He's deliberately leading toward his death. Steadfast determination. Verse 33, we are going up to Jerusalem, he said, and the Son of Man, that's Jesus, will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, that's the Romans in this case, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. Now that's the most detailed of the three predictions that Jesus gives of his own death. But then catch this. The next passage, I'm not going to break it down too much, some of the imagery, because I just preached on it in September in our Momentum at the Movie series. It was F1, the movie, Formula One. And so I'm going to be brief as far as like the details of this passage, but we'll read it. Verse 35, then James and John, 2 of the 12, sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do something. We want you to do for us whatever we ask. What do you want me to do for you? He asks. I'd like you to insert that in the audio Bible. Okay, that's, what do you want me to do for you? He asked. They replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. You don't know what you're asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup I drink, or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink and will be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. When the 10, so 2 of the 12 said this, there's 10 remaining, that's just basic math. When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. So what I want you to see here, not fully what I talked about in September, I want you to see the total incomprehension of the disciples right here. I want you to get what happens. We're supposed to see this. Jesus predicts his death. And then on the heels of that, 2 of the disciples say, can we sit on thrones on your right and your left? Rabbi. Okay, cool. You're going to die. You're going to come back. Can we sit on thrones to your right and your left? Like they have this carte blanche request cast in the language of ancient royal customs, which is the king sits in glory on the throne, and then his number 2 is at his right, number 3 is here at his left. And apparently they expected that when Jesus would get to Jerusalem, he was going to establish his kingdom in their view. So they completely misunderstand what Jesus has been talking about for a chapter and a half, which is the values of the upside-down kingdom that Jesus came to establish. So the story, when we read it, it's meant for us to be embarrassed for James and John. It's meant for us to be like, man, that's kind of cringe. Like he says, guys, I'm going to be spit on. I'm going to die, and then I'm going to rise. Can we get the most prominent places in your kingdom when you establish it? That's meant to be like, wow, how callous can you guys be? And so the reaction of the other 10 is just as bad and as arrogant as what they say, because they are like, what did you ask? And they're just mad that they didn't think of it first. They're like, oh, are you kidding me? We wanted those positions. They asked first or whatever. I hope he doesn't give it to them because they asked first. And they're all mad about it too. This is them, instead of looking at Jesus, the lion and the lamb, and his leadership, the upside-down kingdom, it's them looking at the Roman leaders who lord it over one another, who love power, and saying, we want to be like them. We want to be a part of that kind of kingdom. Give us positions. So one scholar wisely notes this. This narrative contains a bright mirror of human vanity. And what he means by that is just simply this. We're supposed to see ourselves in this story. Like, it's not just the disciples who are dull and thick and don't get it. It's meant to be like, yeah, that's what I am like. So the point is, we have this deep problem with ego. If you're like, not me, you have a deep problem with denial. A deep problem with ego. It's, we are driven selfishly. We can't take criticism. We need people to love us. We're overly dependent on our children, or we're overly dependent on our parents, or our friends, or our looks. We're insecure. We're living selfishly. Certainly, selfishness is the biggest problem in a marriage. Period. That's what, or any other, friendships. It's the biggest problem. It's in sibling rivalries, on sports teams. It's often a featured story in a sports team. It has to do with someone's selfishness. And so some of us are obviously selfish and power hungry, and you're like elbowing the person next to you. Some of us are obvious. Others might say, no, not me, I'm nice. And then you have to ask yourself, but why are you being so nice? It's because likely you need to be needed. And there's all these ways, direct or indirect, that we get to just this ego that each of us have, this selfishness. And what Jesus says is, that's who is holding you at gunpoint. You. It is your selfishness, that self is your God. You've rebelled against God and said, I want to be my own God. That's the story of the world. So our egos are bottomless pits. We need affirmation and approval and comfort and power. Why? To prove to ourselves what we don't believe, and that is, I'm valuable. I'm valuable. So Jesus uses James and John's selfish ambition as a teachable moment. And he says, verse 42, it says, Jesus called them together. Hey guys, huddle up, take a knee, everybody take a knee, everybody take a knee. It's like one of those times like, wait a minute, okay, nope, this is not going to go on. Everybody take a knee, everybody take a knee. Jesus called them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles, the Romans, lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. He's been saying this for a chapter and a half. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. And this is the key verse in the entire Gospel of Mark. For even the Son of Man, Jesus, did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So Jesus uses this entire incident to teach the necessity of humility and service for Christians. Anyone who follows Jesus, claims to follow Jesus, but there's an underscore for Christian leaders. I mean, just the more that you are in leadership, the more this applies to you. And so Jesus is saying the way to a privileged position in the upside-down kingdom isn't grabbing for power, it's relinquishing power through service, suffering, and death. And the pattern of the upside-down kingdom is you have to prove that you can be a servant before God will promote you to be a leader, period. Like he said, the last shall be first, the first shall be last. If you want to be great, you got to be a servant. So unless you know how to obey orders, you have no right giving orders. Unless you know how to submit to authority, then you have no right being in authority. That's the upside-down kingdom. You first have to learn to be a servant. You have to understand how to serve people. Even Jesus followed that order in the upside-down kingdom. It says in Philippians 2, he became obedient to the point of death, and then after that, and at the name of Jesus, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. That's the servanthood of God. So here's a question for you. If you're a follower of Jesus, if you say, I am a Christian, I follow Jesus, you claim to, which not everybody does here, but if you claim to follow Jesus, are you becoming more of a servant? Are you being transformed into the likeness of a servant? That's what Jesus is hammering on in Mark 9 and 10. You guys, not so with you. It's not like what the rest of the world does. Not so with you. So the decision, the challenge before all of us is constantly, many times through our life, maybe many times through our day. You have to decide whether you will aim to become a Lord or a servant. And the disciples, they're like, we want to be a Lord. We're looking at the Gentile leaders, the Romans, and we want to be a Lord. He's like, not so with you. What are you aiming for? Because this is the way to greatness. God says this is the way to greatness. This is who God is, and who Christmas, for example, shows us he is. God is a servant. He entered in to serve and to help. So just sit in that challenge for just a moment, because it brings all of our context to mind. Like you're sitting there, you're thinking of all your context. So what does this mean to decide whether you will aim to become a Lord or a servant in your marriage? What does it mean at work? What does it mean in your relationship to your parents? What does it mean in relationship to your children? What does it mean, on and on at church? What does that mean to aim for one of those two things? And how do I adjust to set a new course? The truth is, leadership is another level of servanthood. The more I've been given responsibility over my life, many times where I've been like, no, please no. Please no. Like the reward often for a job well done is more responsibility. I mean, that's the parables of Jesus. Like, oh, you did a great job. You took you took care of it. Okay, cool. I'm going to take from you and I'm going to give you more. I don't want more though, Jesus. See, I wasn't asking for more. I was just trying to do well with what you gave me. So leadership is another level of servant. You learn to serve people, and then you are maybe promoted in some kind of way, and you're like, man, this is going to be even more service. This is going to be more behind the scenes hard work. And so at Momentum, for example, the elders at Momentum, like our leadership team, we constantly remind each other being an elder at Momentum means we are the lead servants. We get to lead serving. And that's what that means. So this ego, selfishness that we all struggle with, how can we be healed from our own selfishness? Well, the verse that is the key verse, verse 45, even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So Jesus is the Lamb of God. And his mission statement is, I didn't come to be served, but to serve. And so death is the greatest example of service. We see the ultimate payoff. That's the highest level of servanthood. And he doesn't just say that he came to die. Notice, that's too general. He doesn't just say he came to die. He said he came to give his life. There's a difference. That's more specific. I come to give my life. I came to be killed. That is my mission. And in verse 45, you see that one little word for, as a ransom for many. That's just a really simple Greek word that means instead of. Like he substituted himself. This is substitutionary death. I came to give my life as a ransom on behalf of mankind. So Jesus saw his death in terms of Isaiah 53, which were these mysterious prophecies about a suffering servant. And Jesus is like, that's who I am. I am laying my life down on behalf of as a substitutionary offering for the sin of others. So the king of the upside down kingdom is the ultimate servant. The king is the ultimate servant. So why did he give his life? Well, as a ransom for many. And when you hear the word ransom, what we typically think of is, of course, someone being kidnapped. And there's a price to be paid to the kidnappers to buy that person, the ransom, to buy them out of their situation. And that's partly helpful because that's what we think of with ransom. But to understand it fully, you have to go back to Jesus' time. What did it mean back then? And there's a similarity, but the idea is, one scholar put it this way. The word took its origin from the practice of warfare, where it was the price paid to bring a prisoner of war, a POW, out of his captivity and slavery. So back then there weren't POW camps, okay, in that time. If you were a soldier and your country attacked another country and you lost, the way that you were punished, the consequences were, one, you either died, in battle, or two, you were put into slavery by the country that beat you. And so that was the punishment. The only way you could ever escape from that prison is if someone from your home country came and they paid an enormous ransom to pay the price for the captive. And so that ransom is literally a price of release. It's the same word, redemption. It's when you're redeemed, it's you are paid for to come out of that slavery. And so Jesus says this metaphor is critical for understanding what I have done for you, what I've done for mankind. It is you are a slave to or a captive to selfishness. And you have rejected God and you've made yourself your own God. And this metaphor is so important for you to understand. You're in a terrible situation. And so there's two things that faith in Jesus, if you put faith in Jesus, what he did for you through the cross, it causes two things to happen. Okay, the first is, and this is the one that most often is talked about, and I kind of touched on it last week, there's an objective thing that happens to me from the outside. It happens to me. And I'll get to in a minute, there's also a subjective thing that happens in me. But the objective thing that happens to me is that it accomplishes something outside of me. And the thing that it accomplishes, he died to pay the debt for my sins. Okay? So sin puts us in debt to God. As a result, we owe to God this debt of eternal punishment. No greater debt could be imagined. Our problem is that we're alienated from God. And so a lot of times people ask, and it's a good question, like, so why did Jesus need to die? Like, why couldn't God just say, you're forgiven? Okay, Jedi mind trick. We're all going to forget about it. You're forgiven. Why does it seem like he needs to be appeased like some primitive god by blood sacrifices? Yuck. Like, why is that what had to happen? And that's a super understandable question that a lot of people wonder about. So imagine this. Imagine you leave service today. You're a dad and you grab a breakfast sandwich on the way out that we have in the lobby for you. You go out and you head out into the parking lot and you hear loud noises and you see that there's a young man with a huge baseball bat and he's just beating the tar out of your car. He is just ripping up your vehicle. By the way, there's a black Kia SUV out there parked right on the yellow line that one of the kids in the back left the door open. I closed it for you, though, because I was like, I'm all cool. But anyways, so someone's out there just beating on your vehicle. They're just tearing it up. Or you're like, what is going on? And he's tearing it. The windows are destroyed. The hood's so busted up that it's like this. And the engine's destroyed. The hood won't close anymore. It's undrivable. It's ruined. And you call the Macedonia police. And when the cops come, the perp suddenly says, I can't believe I did this. I regret that I've done this. I'm so sorry that I've done this. Will you forgive me? And let's assume for the purpose of the illustration, because it's one of those preacher illustrations, you know what I'm saying? Let's assume he's totally sincere. He's like, I'm really sorry. Will you forgive me? And the officer, the Macedonian officer, just turns to you and looks at you and says, just let it go. Like, say what? Just let it go. And you're like, no, I want you to give me his baseball bat. Like, let's turn things around real quick, or I'm going to have that baseball bat or whatever. And the officer says, you're being vindictive. Just let it go, okay? Frozen. Let it go, okay? Just let it go. So in real life, you would be vindictive, right? You would say, no, I'm going to throw the book at this dude, okay? I'm not going to forgive him. Arrest him right now. And almost everyone would be filled with anger and filled with a personal desire to hurt that person in some way, even if it's just a little grab by the ear and a noogie or something like something. I got to pay back in some way. But imagine the officer turns to you and just says, why can't you just forgive him? Just forgive him. And I want you to see that forgiveness is a huge conundrum. Like, it creates a huge conflict. It's never a simple thing. It's the same as us saying, why can't God just be like, forgive him? Okay, why did Jesus have to die on a cross for that to happen? Well, even if you get rid of the anger and the vindictiveness, assuming you can, get rid of the anger, forgiveness is still a problem. Nobody can just forgive or let it go. That's impossible because every wrong has a cost. Every wrong has a cost. There's damage, there's a cost every time. And so in this illustration, either the criminal pays for the car, or you pay for the car, or some other rando person says, I'll take care of it, I'm going to pay for the car. Somebody pays for the car. Even if you say, I'm not going to replace the car, you've paid for the car. Like, you are absorbing the problem. You're absorbing the damage. And so, the point is that someone has to bear the cost of what happened. It doesn't just evaporate into thin air. What a person has done to you, what you have done to a person, it doesn't just evaporate into Jedi mind trick, it's gone. There's no such thing as a wrong that is not paid for. And it's also, when you think about it, it's not loving to just let it go. Like, would that be the best thing for this dude, the young man that destroyed the car? Would that be the best thing for society? In fact, the more loving you are, the bigger problem forgiveness is. It's all the more big the problem, the bigger the problem that forgiveness is. So God, and I mentioned this last week basically, a God who just forgives is not a holy God, is not a righteous God. He basically just winks at sin like, okay, it'd be okay. That's not a holy God. A God who won't forgive is not a loving God. And a God who can't forgive is not a wise God, meaning he doesn't know how to satisfy both love and justice. And that's what we kind of covered last week. But Jesus, the thing that objectively happens to us through our faith in Jesus, through the cross, is that he redeemed us from the penalty of sin. By laying down his life, he says, I am paying the cost. And he pays that debt. So he's redeemed us from the debt of eternal punishment, of us saying to a God that gave us life, I will do what I want with the life you gave me. And so we're no longer obligated to pay the penalty for sin. And then the other one, which isn't talked about as much, is more of a subjective thing, meaning it's something that happens inside of you. Something, when you put faith in Jesus and the cross, there's a condition, a change that he wants you to experience, and that's liberation. It's nothing short of liberation. We're in slavery. We're enslaved by our selfishness. We die. He died to free our hearts. He died to pay the debt, and he died to free our hearts. He gave his life as a ransom for many. And only that, his death on the cross for us, has the power to break through your selfishness and to liberate us. And then everything changes because now you know what you mean to him. You understand. The cross shows you what you mean to God. And so from then on, money, it isn't the source of your significance, it's just money. Like when you really let the cross liberate your heart, suddenly then relationships, maybe you or someone you can think of as someone who romantically, they run from one relationship. As soon as there's a breakup, they're running to someone else. They're into another. Whether it's a good relationship or toxic, they're just running to another, finding significance in relationships. Well, when the cross liberates your heart, suddenly relationships aren't the source of your significance. They're just relationships. Your appearance isn't the source of your significance. Now it's just your appearance. You're liberated. Why? Because your heart is freed. The understanding that he gave his life as a ransom in place of you, shows you how valuable you are. And the liberating power of the cross of Jesus, it's what saves marriages. Like, I can't even overstate it. It's what saves marriages. It's what saves people who are just killing themselves to be seen in the world, trying to get followers or trying to get attention and accolades at work. It's what saves people like that, because your heart is liberated from that being your source of significance. It saves people who are too caught up in their own comfort and entertainment and environment and enjoyment of life that they don't sacrifice anything for anybody else. But suddenly your heart is liberated to where you can find deep joy in serving others, and you realize that is greatness. That is like God. And so the meaning behind the cross becomes such a source of joy and peace to the disciples after the resurrection. There's this total change. And suddenly the cross is such a source of joy and peace that their lives become attractive to everyone around them, and Christianity spreads like wildfire throughout the Roman Empire. And so he died to free our hearts. That's the subjective thing. The ransom metaphor means Jesus died to bring us out of bondage. And just to add one more just application kind of question is, maybe there's people here who are like, yeah, I've always believed Jesus died for me. I've always believed that, or I've believed that for a very long time. So if you believe Jesus died, then the challenging question is has it changed your life? Has it turned you inside out? Has it flipped your life and your values upside down? Are you unusual or remarkable in some way? And the thing that's hard to kind of break through this, this feeling of I've always known this, it's just there. Because if you're not, if it hasn't changed you in some way, then you probably know that he died, but you don't really understand why he died. And you've got to figure out how to wrestle with that of like connecting those dots because the penny hasn't fully dropped yet. Last week we took our kids to D.C. We moved our oldest son, Zion, into his host family house in Northern Virginia suburbs of D.C., and we said our sad goodbyes for his one-year internship, and then we went with the other two kids because he had to start the next day and was like, hey, you guys go on and do the sightseeing thing. I want to get settled in and started. So we took our other two kids downtown D.C. for a couple nights, looked at the sights. Shannon and I had lived there, so it had been many years since we had seen them, but it was really cool to show the kids. But one of the bridges, there's a bunch of bridges along the Potomac on 14th Street, and we crossed a few of them a few times. But there's one there called Arland D. Williams Jr. Memorial Bridge, and it was right next to us. Several times we kept crossing one that goes from the Lincoln to Arlington Cemetery, basically. It's right next to that. So back in January 1982, Air Florida Flight 90 took off from Washington National, and it started to lose altitude. Maybe it's winter, maybe it had ice on the wings or something like that. But it hit the 14th Street Bridge, and it went into the river. And when that happened, helicopters came, to do rescue stuff where they were, people were sinking in the freezing waters of the Potomac River, and the plane was sinking. And so the only thing sticking out when a rescue helicopter got there was the tail of the plane. And everyone was drowned or drowning. And so you could see in the tail, you could see into the tail through the ripped fuselage. There's one guy, Arland D. Williams, who was the most visible. He was the most prominent. He was the most accessible. He was at the opening of the torn plane, basically, and he seemed to be the most alert. And so when the rescue helicopter got there, they lowered a harness and a lifeline to this guy. But every time they pulled it up, someone else was on it. He was standing there with access to it, and he would get someone, and he would put them in the harness. He'd send it up. So every time they'd look down, they'd see this guy. They'd throw it on the harness, and they pull it all up or whatever, and it's a totally different person. They're like, oh, he sent somebody else. And so the first time they lowered it, he put someone else. Second time, he put someone else on. Third time, he saved 5 people's lives. And then the last time they went back, tail was gone. It was sunk. And so he had died. Died doing what? Substituting himself. Giving his place of deliverance. He took their destruction, what was coming on them, and he gave them his rescue. Why does that move you? Why does that move me? Like that is the reason it is because it's the most morally beautiful thing that we know. In any story, fiction or nonfiction, it doesn't matter if it's Harry Potter or if it's a plane in the Potomac, the moral beauty of a story like that, a substitutionary sacrifice, just captures us. And that is why Jesus is basically saying, man, all other religions give you information. I give you a story. Here is what the cross does for you. It is a true story of a ransom. It is a ransom story of how much God loves you, how valuable you are to him, that he's paid your price, and he wants to liberate your heart. Let's pray.